chi'n gael hyd yma hi. Gweddiwn. Ata ti o ddiw ein tad, y goleuni tragwyddol, y trawn yn awr i ofyn am dyfendith arnom fel cynghorwyr a swyddogion cyngor sydd ymdych. Arfyniwn am dy gymorth a ddoleuni yn ein holl ymdrin a'n gwaith, oherwydd hebo ti yn ei allwn neithi'r dim. Arweiniad dyro i ni weld y ffordd yn eglur o'n blaen i oresgym bob anhawster. Gofyn nhw'n hyn yn enw Iesu Grist ein harglwydd. Amen.
Amen.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly croeso y swyddogol wan, da ni ar y we yn dan nawr. Pe cyntaf ydy'r ymddiheuriadau ac Erwin, hefo ymddiheuriad neu?
Da ni'n wedi cael ymddiheuriadau.
Na, dwi wedi cael un, Gary. Gwyneth Kenso ddim rhyw dda iawn ar hyn o bryd, felly dwi'n siŵr bod ni'n anfon yn dymuniadau gorau iddi am wellad. Oes yna neb arall dwi'n meddwl?
Yes. I have...
Ian Blakely.
Oh. I also have Councillor Bob Murray and Councillor Joan Butterfield.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Pat Jones.
Pat, diolch yn fawr. Unrhyw un arall? Na ni, diolch yn fawr iawn. Datgan diddordeb, gai ofyn i Gary Williams redeg drwy'r rheolau. Diolch yn fawr, Gary.
Members will be aware of the requirement under the Council's Code of Conduct to declare any personal or prejudicial interest in respect of any business to be considered at today's meeting. Such interest should be declared now, or as soon as the councillor affected becomes aware that they have a personal or prejudicial interest in the business. All members declaring an interest are required to state clearly what the interest is and to advise whether it is a personal interest or a personal and prejudicial interest as defined in the Code of Conduct. Any member declaring a prejudicial interest is required to leave the chamber for the duration of the business and can take no part in the proceedings. Members with personal interest only may take part in the debate in any vote. If a personal or personal and prejudicial interest is declared today that has not previously been disclosed and recorded, the councillor concerned will be required to complete and sign a declaration of interest form, which is available on request.
Diolch yn fawr, Gary. Oes rhywun eisiau dasgan diddordeb yn unrhyw rhan o'r rhaglen heddiw? Os newch chi gofio, pe ddown ni ato, os fydd beth yn codi, neu wrth eswn dderbyn eich datganiad chi de. Rhif 3, materion brys, mae gyna un dwi eisiau gychwyn hefo, a wedyn fyddwn ni'n mynd at yr un Ceri Mair Davies, sef llongyfach Ann Jones, aelod seneddol, cynulliad at ei hirddo ag OBE, felly llongyfachiadau sef cyn gynghorydd hefo ni flynyddoedd yn ôl. Felly gai ofyn wan, mae cwestiwn yn dod oddi wrth Ceri Mair Davies. Diolch yn fawr.
Morning, everyone. I hope you're all well. Just a bit of history about the question that we've got. In July 2020, Welsh Government supported a 10-year plan to put social enterprise at the heart of a fairer and more sustainable and more prosperous Wales. As stated by the Deputy Minister of Economy and Transport, Lee Waters, social enterprises have a key role to play in both the recovery from COVID-19's economic blow and in helping build back better. Social and environmental enterprises in Ruthin and Denbigh have been taking practical actions towards supporting the climate emergency and Wellbeing and Future Generation Acts in the last few years, but have been unable to find the support needed when seeking affordable and suitable space to start out to test their concepts. To support community regeneration and to bring back to local communities and town centres, it is essential that we work creatively, keeping the future of our communities in the forefront of our minds. The lack of affordable premises has been a recurring theme with regards to the barriers of local social and community organisations, and there seems to be a real opportunity for us to work collaboratively to utilise the underutilised and underused empty spaces that Denbighshire County Council currently has. Could Denbighshire County Council provide a full list of all properties, land, rooms, assets owned by Denbighshire town and community councils that are underutilised and underoccupied?
Diolch yn fawr. Sorry. Cynghorydd Julian Thompson-Hill yn ymateb. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the question. As with most things, this probably is not quite as simple as first envisaged. We certainly can provide a schedule of vacant premises within our property portfolio. Having looked at the list, there are very few actually on there that aren't vacant school premises actually. And we can also provide a current list of vacancies within our commercial portfolio. And I think I probably want to stress here that our asset strategy essentially is not to hold any building or property that we don't actually have a requirement for either operational or commercial reasons. So we can provide that. That's not an issue. Included within the question, I think, was also a comment about town and community council buildings. Obviously, that we can't provide those because we don't have any control over those data. We can only provide data for Denbighshire County Council assets. In terms of underutilisation, it's a bit more slightly more of a difficult prospect. In terms of our office portfolio, we are aware where we have vacancies, and in fact we have been working with partners. You'll be aware of we have NHS colleagues working out of County Hall. We've got the coroner working there, and we're in the process of moving other buildings, other groups into the County Hall in order to maximise the utilisation of that. Of course, all of this is underpinned by the fact that if you wanted a literal answer as of today, all our buildings are underutilised and unoccupied essentially because of COVID, and that's I suppose the underlying issue here. We've seen the significant change in working patterns that has happened over the last 12 months, and nobody knows exactly what will happen moving forward. So we will have to reassess that as and when we get back to some semblance of normality. In terms of the commercial portfolio, from its title, I mean, these are things like industrial units, farms, primarily, where we run them as essentially as a commercial operation to gain rental income. We have generally very high occupancy rates in there, but those are obviously occupied on a market rent basis. I don't want to steal the speaker's thunder, but I've obviously been privy to your supplementary question as well. So if it's okay with yourself, I'll answer both in one hit. Your second supplementary question related to policies relating to community asset transfers. We don't actually have any formal adopted policy for this, but we have carried out a significant number of these over the recent years, but they're dealt with on a case-by-case basis. Primarily, we've been working with town or community councils, transferring the asset to them, and then they would work with other more local groups. Normally, it's a case of us being approached about a specific property by an organisation. Occasionally, we will actually go out where we see a natural fit perhaps for an organisation to take responsibility for a building. But it would again be based upon, obviously, as you would probably expect, seeing as we're dealing with public assets, a business plan to explain, to clarify how buildings will be utilised and how ongoing maintenance and running costs would be able to be delivered. And they would generally be done on a long-term transfer. I know sometimes we get asked for short-term leases and things like that and licenses, but we generally wouldn't go along those lines. We'd be looking for a whole site permanent transfer if that was the way that people were looking. And then we have an entire process that we would have to go through in terms of making sure that we that it complied with the Local Government Act disposals consent. That we would have to get external valuations on it, and then there's an internal process with regards to making a decision. So I'm sorry, that's a bit of a long, convoluted answer. I hope it answers the question, and certainly we can provide the questioner with those two lists of schedules for our properties, and hopefully that answers the question to the best of my knowledge. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Junior Thompson-Hill am ymateb, a diolch i chi, Ceri Mair Davies, am y cwestiwn. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Cymwch o fol. Felly, awn ni ymlaen i y Cynghorydd Brian Jones, sydd wedi gofyn am gael diweddariad ynglyn â'r llifogydd, dwi'n meddwl. Diolch yn fawr, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, it's just a brief statement from me regarding the flooding in Denbighshire last week, and I think it's a very appropriate thing to do. The flooding caused last week in Denbighshire by Storm Christoph was devastating for the people, the residents, the businesses that had homes flooded, businesses flooded, and I'm sure everyone on this meeting this morning would like to express our sympathies with those people affected by Storm Christoph as they begin the long journey recovering from it. I was out and about. It was awful to watch it unfolding last week on the evening, and I've since been out to St Asaph, to Ruthin, to the Llanellan Bridge, and even in my hometown of Rhyl, where the Sainsbury's retail park was flooded, and the Ford Derwin area had a near miss. Pretty awful to see that. And I've got a visit booked in this week with Mervyn Parry to go and look up his area of the world, the rural areas, to see the effects up there. I'd like to pay a small little tribute as the lead member to the Denbighshire Highway staff on the ground who put a lot of work in preparing for the storm before it arrived. They were involved on the ground along with locals in the affected areas and in some cases councillors. So I'd like to pay tribute to all those people that were involved as it was happening. And our Denbighshire staff are working still today on the aftermath and the fallout of the storm. So tribute to everybody concerned there. Unfortunately, these storm events are becoming a regular occurrence, not just in Denbighshire, but across the globe. So we need to review and look at our endeavours to see what we can do as an authority to best protect all our communities going forward. If I can say, Chair, to finish on a positive note, at a recent scrutiny meeting, it was discussed about the formation of a task and finish group to look at potential and known flood risk areas in Denbighshire, with a view to doing something really positive. The highlight line of this group, the remit is being put together as I speak, but the highlight on the group is that we've already had a buying agreement from Natural Resources Wales to be part of the group, for Welsh Water to be part of the group. Obviously, Denbighshire County Council will be in that group, but we also want to have involved in the group land and farm owners within the county, the relevant local county councillors when they're looking at a specific area. And I'm really looking forward to this group coming into existence, because I think it could do a lot of good. It could be a really good tool and a good mechanism to combat the climate change effects that we're seeing across the UK, around the world. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Da ni'n derbyn cwestiynau? Gary?
Mae fyny atoch chi, Gadeirydd. Fel arfer o dan materion brys, da ni ond yn unig gael datganiad gan rhywun neu cwestiwn o dan y proses ffurfiol. Mae fyny atoch chi.
Wel, da chi gadw at y rheol yn dydi chwarae teg. Da ni'n eisiau cychwyn i'n byd. Felly mae'n ddrwg yna os neu rhywun a diddordeb mewn gofyn, i ofyn ar ôl y cyfarfod, ia? Sori, Jeanette, da ni'n derbyn cwestiynau. Diolch yn fawr.
It wasn't a question, it was a thank you.
Ia, wel, na I ddiolch drostoch chi a croeso, achos dwi'n meddwl bod y gweithwyr y sir, cynghorwyr a phawb oedd yn rhwm ar broblem y llifogydd ym mhob rhan o'r sir wedi gweithio'n galed i gynorthwyo y rhai llai ffortunus na ni, ac dwi'n siŵr bod ni ddiolchgar tu hwnt iddyn nhw am hynny. Fel mae Brian wedi dweud, mae rhywbeth sydd yn digwydd yn amlach rwan, ac fel da chi'n gwybod, da ni'n yn trefnant wedi colli pont Llanerch, a wedyn mae'r ffordd honno mynd i fod wedi chau am peth amser yn greu hon. Felly, diolch i chi gyd am eich cyfraniad hael. Y siaradwr nesaf sydd wedi gofyn ydy cynghorydd Emrys Wyn.
Dwi'n siŵr bod wedi... Dych chi'n clywed i? Diolch chi'n meddwl.
Dan iawn, Emrys.
Diolch yn fawr. Ia, gael na tegu'r sylwadau dych chi, mae Brian Jones a Chithen a wneud hefyd parthed y llifogydd, ac dwi'n edrych ymlaen na ryw ymchwiliad i'r gwybod yn ystyn. Dros y penwythnos, gwelwyd adroddiadau yn y wasg a wedd yn honni bod aelodau staff Cyngor Sir Ddinbych wedi derbyn brechiad Covid-19 oddi wrth y Gwasanaeth Iechyd Cenedlaethol, nad oedd unt yn ôl yr honiadau yn gymwys i wneud hynny. Os oedd y stori hon eisoes yn wybyddus i'r Cyngor Sir, pam na chyfathrebwyd a'r aelodau ynglŷn â'r stori a oedd ar dorri?
Diolch yn fawr. Prifeithredwr. Arweinydd gyntaf, dyna ni.
Diolch Cadeirydd.
Hugh Evans.
Diolch Cadeirydd, llwch chi clywed fi'n iawn gallwch?
Ardderchog.
Diolch Cadeirydd, diolch Emrys am y cwestiwn. Dwi am ymateb cyntaf Emrys a dwi'n gofyn wrth Judith ddod I fewn wedyn. From my perspective, the council is clearly for officers and members with their respective roles. But on this occasion, as your question implies, Emrys, this information was not shared with any members of the council. And it is only officers who were familiar with the situation prior to it breaking out in the press. My response was that, and due to the seriousness of the accusation, we did call a special cabinet meeting on Sunday evening to try and understand what was happening. We then called another informal cabinet meeting on Monday morning with officers. It was unclear as to what had happened within the authority, and as cabinet members and all members, we were in the dark, and that's why we agreed to call for an internal investigation to get to the bottom of what was being highlighted in the press. And the reason we called for an internal investigation was for three main considerations. The first point, it's really important to note, while things are highlighted in the press, it's important that we as an authority, office and members, are familiar with all the facts before we either take any action or have a position on it. Therefore, responding to the press is not the ideal way to reach a conclusion. The second point I wanted to make was around the staff. As we know, We have brilliant staff within the authority. The amount of work that they have done during COVID has been quite unbelievable. And I didn't want our staff to be painted all with the same brush with the possible actions, and I have to say possible actions, of the very small minority. The third point, and probably the most important point, is that it's important that we as an authority give assurance to our residents that the support that we have for Betsy is open and transparent, as we will all have residents in our communities who are desperately and patiently waiting for the vaccination. And it's important to them that everything the authority does is open and transparent, and that we can assure them that we will not be condoning, supporting, or allowing anybody to jump the queue, and that it would be totally in line with Welsh Government guidelines and the priority administered within that. And that's really important, Emrys, that we have that clear position from a member's perspective. Diolch, Emrys, and I'll ask Judith to respond to that.
Yes, Judith. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair. Bore da, members. Denbighshire County Council submitted a list to Betsy Cadwallader along with every other local authority and public institution and private institution that's eligible in North Wales, containing a list of our staff that were eligible for COVID vaccination according to the Welsh Government priorities. Those same staff were then sent an email by Betsy Cadwallader inviting them to book an appointment to receive that vaccination. What became apparent to us recently is there's the possibility that if eligible staff had forwarded that email, there was a glitch in the Betsy Cadwallader system that may have allowed non-eligible staff to have potentially booked an appointment. When this became apparent to us, we contacted all staff to instruct them not to forward this email, and that was apparent on the email. And our IT team are currently investigating what action has taken place, if any, amongst those staff. We've completed the first phase of that investigation, and at the moment there is certainly no evidence of any mass sharing of the email, or indeed therefore subsequently fraudulent attempts to obtain a vaccination. I can assure members that once this investigation is complete, if any of our staff have taken an appropriate action to obtain a vaccination, that will be followed up with disciplinary action. However, I just need to emphasise to you that at this moment in time, there is no evidence that staff have used the email loophole to obtain a vaccination. And as the leader said, our staff have worked incredibly hard throughout this pandemic. I have the utmost confidence in their integrity and their honesty. And I sincerely believe that if anybody has taken any action that was inappropriate, it will be a very, very small number of staff, and that, I say, disciplinary action will be taken. And of course, I will update members once that investigation has concluded. I have to say that the report in the press, I believe, was inaccurate, and I don't think represented the situation as it currently is on the ground in Denbighshire. So just to reiterate, at this moment in time, we have no reason to believe that any Denbighshire staff have accessed a COVID-19 vaccination when they shouldn't have done so according to Welsh Government priorities.
Diolch yn fawr i chi, a diolch i Huw hefyd. Diolch yn fawr i chi.
CYTUNWYD.
Ia, mae gennych chi hawl i gwestiwn, does?
Ie, mae gennych chi hawl i ofyn cwestiwn ychwanegol os mae'n dod allan o'r cwestiwn greiddiol neu'r ateb da chi wedi gael.
Diolch yn fawr, Emrys.
Diolch yn fawr, yeah. I'll do this one in English because I'll be quoting from what the Chief Executive has just said now. When this became apparent to us, can I ask the question, when did this become apparent to yourself, Chief Executive, or your officers, and when was it apparent for yourselves that it was going to be hit in the press?
Okay, Bore da, Emrys. It was on the 14th, I believe, of January that it became apparent to us that there may be a loophole in the Betsy Cadwallader booking system that could possibly have allowed staff to book an inappropriate vaccine. It was at that stage we sent the email to all staff instructing that this was not allowed. And at that time we commenced the investigation. I presume that the press picked up on it subsequent from that. But then obviously it's taken some time for them to concoct the story that they did.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you.
Dwi'n ar y meic, rydw. Yna fo, diolch yn fawr i chi'ch dau am yr ymatebion a'r cwestiwn. Dwi'n meddwl bod y cynghorydd Arwel Roberts yn gwybod ni ddim wedi derbyn i'w ddatganiad o, felly gai ofyn yn garedig i'r adran cynllunio cynllun lleol i ymateb yn llawn i'r cynghorydd Roberts ynglyn â'r cwestiwn oedd o'n meddwl i godi heddiw bore. A wrach os ni'n cael i gyd gael gwybod be oedd yr ateb. Diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n meddwl mae hynny'n ddim byd arall.
Ie, mae hynny'n digon deg, ie.
Dyna ni. Felly awn ni ymlaen i'r cofnodion. A'i drwyddyn nhw'n ar y 10. A am gywirdeb gyntaf. Felly, tudalen 7 sgynna i yn y Gymraeg. 1 i 3. Os yna rhywun hefo sylw o gywiriad y fanno. Wel, mae gynna i un, sef yn y Gymraeg, beth bynnag, anfonwyd cydymdeimlad i'r AM. Wel, ebyn hyn, dydyn nhw wedi newid yn dydy. Dwi'n meddwl bod fi'n iawn, yndw? Dyna fo. Felly dwi'n siŵr wneith y cofnodion gael eu cywiro. Yr ail dudalen, sef tudalen 8, cofnod 4, 5, cofnod drosodd i tudalen 9. Lle mae'r penderfyniad? Unrhyw sylw? Nag oes. Drosodd wedyn i tudalen 10. Wel, mae gynna un ar y dudalen yma cyn y rhif 6, sef yn y Gymraeg yn arfortunus eto bod y cabinet yn cadarnhau fel y cyngor ydy ond de. Mae yna rhywun di anghofio newid yr enw.
Ie, nawn ni gywiro.
Diolch yn fawr, Gary. Awn ni drosodd i tudalen 11. Unrhyw gywiriad y fanno? Nag oes. Trosodd eto i 12, y rhif 8. Neb. Tudalen 3 ar 10. A 9, rhif 9. Trost y dudalen. Rhif 4 ar 10. Na. Mae'n jyst llithiad bach lleia sy'n yn y Gymraeg. Mae'r Cyngor Sir Ddinbych yn gal war lywodraeth, yn galw, ydy llithro mae'r llythyren. Dyna chwbl, ddim byd mawr. Awn ni nôl i weld os yna rhywbeth yn codi wan o'r cofnodion. Tudalen 7, 1, 2 a 3. Trosodd i tudalen 8, 4, 5. Rhywbeth yn codi.
Can I ask a question?
Ia, croeso, ia, pwy di hwnna? Paul Pender,
Paul Penlington.
Penlington, sorry, Paul.
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't find the button. I'm not sure what page you're on because I don't have page numbers on my documents. I've just got items. Item 3, I asked about certain councillors secretly recording meetings and then subsequently putting screenshots onto social media. Leader Hugh told me there was going to be a protocol put in place. Has that protocol been put in place?
No, sorry, I thought there was some feedback there. No, sorry, Paul. No, it's on my list of things to do. I did start it, but I haven't finished it yet. But I will be doing it, and I will be circulating it to group leaders.
Okay.
Dyna'n iawn. Diolch, Paul. Thank you. Tudalen 9, dwi'n meddwl ni arno fo. Neb. A dros y tudalen 10, eitem 6 a rhan o'r llall. Brian Jones, diolch yn mewn, cynghorydd Brian Jones.
Apologies, Chair, it was a mistake.
O, iawn. Diolch am gyfaddau. Chwarae teg i chi. Rhif 11. Na, neb. 12. Rhif 8. 3 ar 10. Rhif 9. A rhan o 8. 4 ar 10. 10, 11 a 12. Nag oes? Felly, os a rwy'n am gynnig bod nhw'n derbyn y cofnodion fel rhai cywir rwan? Wedi gwneud...
I
Wedi
propose
gynnig Alan.
Vice Chair.
Diolch, Alan.
Alan James, Vice Chair.
Cynghorydd Alan James. Eilydd. Ann Davies, Cynghorydd Ann Davies. Diolch yn fawr. Newch chi gyd ddangos. Os ellwch chi wneud yn beiriannol gorau'n byd neu hefo llaw, mi welwch fi yn y fama. Swyddogion... Os yw rhywun yn erbyn o gwbl, diolch yn fawr. Rhywun yn erbyn neu yn ymatal? Na.
Yeah, I'm against.
Sorry?
I am against. I don't think some of the comments about the nuclear growth deal are accurate.
Iawn. Un yn erbyn. Diolch yn fawr, Paul. Eitem 5 felly. Ar gyllideb, a dwi'n meddwl mai Cynghorydd Julian Thompson Hill sydd yn cyflwyno.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Diolch, Julian.
Okay, I don't think it takes me to say that we've been through a very difficult and unusual year, and that's been none more the case than with regards to our finances. I certainly never thought when I was doing this last year that I'd be presenting the budget from my home this year. And it just goes to show how we've had to adapt to developing circumstances. Those circumstances have basically necessitated that a number of the usual processes that we would probably have gone through have had to be contracted into a much shorter time period this year. The budget board was restarted back in the early summer, and began to set some assumptions that we had to have in order to begin our work. And before the summer recess, services were asked to come forward with proposals for an up to 4% reduction in their budgets. Those proposals were then assessed in the autumn by the budget board initially, and we went through those, and some were proposed to be taken forward, some were required further work, and some were omitted for a wide variety of reasons. Again, entirely understandably, but we've not been helped by the fact that we had little or no early indications this year from Welsh Government in terms of what we could expect in terms of our settlement. And the timetable for announcements has also changed on a fairly regular basis until we actually had the draft settlement released on the 22nd of December. We usually receive it in around about mid-October. And the final settlement, which we normally get around about just before Christmas, is not actually now going to be released until the beginning of March. We're not anticipating that there will be any significant changes between the draft settlement and the final settlement. And Welsh Government have given us the assurance that the settlement that's been issued is a business as usual basis, and that any ongoing and continued COVID financial support would be dealt with outside of the normal budget process. Members should be aware, either from attending the session that we had just prior to Christmas on the 21st of December, or I circulated the presentation for members who weren't able to attend. that we'd identified around about £8.25 million of pressures that we really had little option other than to address. And we'd further identified another suite of around about £3.1 million of pressures, which in an ideal world we would like to be able to meet, assuming there was sufficient headroom within the RSG settlement. One of the assumptions that we were still working on at that stage prior to announcement of the draft settlement was that we were still working on the basis that RSG would be flat. There'll be a 0% increase. We were assuming that that was a very much a worst case scenario and that it would be better than that, but that was the assumption that we were working on in terms of the calculations for those figures. And just to clarify, we would have needed a settlement somewhere in the region of in excess of 8% to have actually covered all of everything that we actually required, and nobody was realistically expecting that we would get something along those lines. So if I can turn to the detail of the draft settlement, the Welsh average was an increase of 3.8% uplift. We were an increase of 3.6%, so a little bit below the average. There was quite a wide range this year, probably the widest range in terms of settlement announcements that I've seen across Wales, from under 3% at the lowest end to over 5.6% at the upper end. And I'll come back to a potential issue with that a little bit later on. That settlement, as you'll see in section 4.2 in your report, also allows for transfers in of former specific grants into the settlement of £1.28 million. You'll see in section 4.3 a summary of the pressures that we are able to fund from within the 3.6% uplift, and the 3.6 in terms of cash generated £5.42 million of additional income over and above the 0% working assumption that we'd had going into it. So that left a gap of around about just under £5.2 million that needed to be found. So we addressed that in a number of manners. The first relates to increases in fees and charges. As I'm sure you'll be aware, we adopted a couple of years back a fees and charges policy, went through corporate governance and cabinet, which essentially meant that heads of service were expected to review on an annual basis all the fees and charges within their portfolio areas, and to increase them at least in line with inflation, where it was legally possible so to do. And as a guiding principle, these areas should be as near as possible to self-funding from the income as possible. So that review garnered around £0.462 million of proposed additional income. Then, coming out of the proposals that came forward from the services, there were a number that were classified as genuine efficiencies, which are identified, as I say, throughout the year, and were within head of service delegation levels, and where there would be no impact upon the public. And that would generate, £0.69 million. There were then a further category of savings where there would be some change in the manner of service provision those not necessarily cuts, they might be a different way of doing things. Those were shared with members at the briefing in December. Then in terms of schools, as I say, if you remember, 2 budget cycles ago, schools were asked to find a 2% efficiency saving. Last year, we began by asking them again for 2%, but because the settlement actually came in better than we had been anticipating, we were able to reduce the impact of that down to 1%. And again, for the coming year, we're asking them for 1% of efficiency savings for 21-22. Again, that's in comparison to the other services who were asked to find 4%. The Schools Budget Forum, who govern obviously the way schools finance is divided up, have been aware of this for some time, and have been working with individual schools to be able to deliver that. So that would generate around about £733,000. We have to assess annually what we think we're going to get in from our council tax base. We always assess that prudently, and the actual income we think will be an increase of £369,000. So that then brings us to the always thorny subject of council tax, which essentially becomes the balancing figure. And I think you've all been circulated at various times with the sensitivity analysis of how an increase or a decrease affects the amount of income that we would actually have coming into the authority. As I said to Cabinet last week, and I'll say it again now, I think most of you probably will know my position that we shouldn't, as a matter of good policy, be asking our residents, particularly at the time when they're in such a straitened situation as they are with COVID now, to pay a penny more than they actually absolutely have to for us to be able to deliver our services. So the recommendation that I'm putting to members today is that we would increase the council tax level by 3.8%. That would generate £2.132 million of additional funding for the authority, and that would then balance off the budget proposals. Just to remind you, in terms of comparative terms, the figure for our element was 4.3% last year and 6.35% the year before. It's always a fine line in the balance in terms of increasing pressure on residents in terms of additional council tax and reducing the services that we provide them to, which are really the only two levers we have to address any shortfall. I said a little bit earlier that I'd touch on the wide range of settlements across Wales. And the reason I'm doing that is because some of those authorities who've received a significantly lower settlement level than others, as you would expect, have been lobbying nationally for a floor mechanism to be put in. In other words, that there will be a level below which nobody received an increase. And since the overall quantum would not change, if that were to happen, then essentially the other authorities who were above that floor would take a small reduction across the board to pick up that slack. Whether that will happen or not, we don't know, but I know there are ongoing discussions. Also, the issue we have is that we're obviously making decisions, as are all other authorities, in the absence of the final settlement. And as I've said, Welsh Government have given us all the assurances, and we have no reason to doubt that, that there will be little or no movement between the draft settlement and the final settlement. But it's always a possibility. So you'll see that one of the recommendations in the report would be a delegation to Steve as Section 151 officer, in conjunction with myself as lead member, to use cash up to £500,000 in order to balance the budget, were there to be any movement between the draft and final settlements. If I can just summarise now and say that, although I probably sounded quite negative throughout this presentation, I do want to stress the positive points that are within the proposals that are in front of you. The proposals mean that we will be meeting pay and inflationary pressures of just over £1.25 million. I'll go into more detail on this one in the next paper, but we're having to put an additional £350,000 into the council tax reduction scheme. Schools will be getting an extra just over £3.25 million put into the delegated budgets. So even allowing for the 1% efficiency saving of £730,000 net, they'll be receiving over £2.5 million of additional funding. Community support services for adult social care, we're putting in another £2.4 million for that. £750,000 for education and children's services, for the pressures in children's services primarily. £250,000 to address some pressures within the waste budget area. We've made some previous decisions as a council on flood schemes and various other elements, and we're securing the funding for the potential borrowing to secure that, just over £250,000. In terms of, I know that we're putting in £389,000 of base budget to support potential borrowing to support the initiatives which are being developed to achieve our carbon zero target. I know that's going through a different formal adoption process, but we've put the funding in place on to allow for that. We're converting the one-off cash that we put in the budget last year into a budget line of £250,000 to assess the impacts from the ash dieback scenario. And given all the uncertainties that I've been through with you, both over the late final settlement, COVID, we don't know exactly what's going to happen going forward into next year, and any impacts from Brexit. It's only prudent that we have a contingency in place, and there was a contingency of £683,000 being allocated into that, into the proposals. Obviously, if everything goes well and we have no call on that, that would be the first call that we would have for the following year's budget savings. So I think, to summarise, all of those are positive investments that we're making in our core services. The savings proposals are not going to, in any significant way, impact upon our residents. I wouldn't say that that there aren't potential impacts on internal capacity, but those are things that we've been facing on an ongoing basis for a number of years and have to work with, as do all public authorities. We're proposing a council tax increase, which, whilst higher than I'm sure many might like, is the minimum that I would recommend to you that we could actually deliver a balanced budget upon, and is broadly in line with what most of our North Wales colleagues are putting forward as well. Not that that necessarily need be a guide, but it does mean that we're not doing something that's widely out of kilter with what other authorities are having to do. So I think that's probably all I needed to say, Chair. I don't know whether Steve had anything that he wanted to add, which I've missed or got wrong. Otherwise, I'm sure members will have questions and we'll go to that.
Ofyn, ydy Steve eisiau deud gair?
Just very quickly, I've just knocked off everything that I was going to say from Julian as usual. He's covered everything. The only thing just to mention that I did go to School Budget Forum again yesterday morning with the final proposal. So that there were, there were very few questions. I think they were pleased with the 2 additional pieces of investment, which are the bits around the ALN and the small school sustainability, because we usually commit to covering all their inflationary costs. And then have an target for them. And this year, obviously, we're funding some specific specific pressures. I'm just going to stop my camera. Sorry, I'm trying to work with 2 children and a teacher as a wife, all online at the same time. So my broadband is struggling at the moment. So yeah, so just to confirm really that the School Budget Forum have been consulted on the actual final proposals that are in front of you today, which I think was what I mentioned at Cabinet of you who were there last week.
Diolch yn fawr. Diolch yn fawr, Steve. Cyn I ni fynd i'r cwestiynau, mae gennau beth bynnag 4 cynghorydd eisiau gofyn cwestiwn. Ga I jyst gywiro tudalen y 19fed. Mae yna lithriad yn 3.3.5 bod y cyngor bod y cabinet yn cadarnhau, wel, cyngor ydy hwnna eto, ac yn is I lawr yn 4.3, nes I ofyn yn garedig i'r cabinet gywiro hwn, a dwi'n datgan diddordeb fel personol am bod fi'n aelod o'r awdurdod tân, ardoll, wel, taliad, cais am daliad gan yr awdurdod y gwasanaeth tân ydy y gost yna. Jyst I gywiro. Felly, ymlaen â'r cwestiynau, Cynghorydd Mabon ap Gwynfor, os gwelwch yn dda.
Da bawb. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Gadeirydd, am roi cyfle I fi siarad a holi cwestiynau. Diolch I Julian am y cyflwyniad hefyd. Ambell I beth dwi eisiau I godi, yn gyntaf gyd mae'r defnydd o eiriau yn y cyflwyniad yn ddifyr iawn. Mae Julian yn cyfeirio ato ac yn dweud ein bod ni yn gwneud hyn llall ag arall. Dwi'n meddwl yma ar y cychwyn fod yn bwysig I ni nodi, mae nid ni fel corff sy'n mynd I wneud hyn, y cabinet sydd wedi gwneud hyn, ac mae eisiau pwysleisio mai cyllideb y cabinet ydy hyn, nid yn cyllideb ni. Mae'r diffyg ymgynghori a'r diffyg tryloiwder sydd wedi bod yn y broses yma, yn fwy nag unrhyw un blaenorol wedi bod yn siom aruthrol a dweud y lleia. Yn wir, o siarad efo rhai cynghorwyr sydd wedi bod yn ymhell ar awdurdod flynyddoedd yn ôl, fyse dyddiau wedi cael ei neilltuo I drafod cyllideb. Dwi'n sicr yn cofio ers yng nghyfnod I yma cael reams o bapurau efo ffigurau arnyn nhw'n trafod ac yn meddwl pa rif sydd yn mynd I lle a lle dylid cymryd o un adran i'r llall I weld os posib neu fwy o synwyr. Yn yr achos yma, does dim o'r ddim wybodaeth wedi cael ei gyflwyno I ni. Mae gyda ni un dudalen sydd yn rhyw fath o balance sheet, un dudalen analysis o asesiad, ag yr adroddiad I hun ac yna yr asesiad llesiant i'r dyfodol. Dyna'r cyfan da ni wedi cael fan hyn yn cynnig dim gwybodaeth mewn gwirionedd am yr hyn sy'n mynd ymlaen o fewn y cyngor. Felly nid yn cyllideb ni ydy hyn, does na ddim manylion o gwbl yma. Ac yn wir yn yr asesiad ar gyfer y dyfodol, yr Wellbeing Impact Assessment, mae yn nodi'n glir fod na ddim cyfathrebu wedi bod a ddim tryloiwder wedi bod drwy siarad efo cyrff allanol trwy'n siarad efo ni. Yn wir, cyn y Nadolig ddaru ni gael briefing, oedd y briefing hynna ddiwrnod cyn I Llywodraeth Cymru osod I cyllideb, felly oedd y briefing yna'n wastraff amser, wath chi ddeud, ac yna ers hynny, da ni wedi cael dim. ddaru'r y papur yma gael ei gyflwyno i'r cabinet wsos dwytha, ac yna mae o'n blaen ni fan hyn heddiw, heb bod ni wedi cael dim amser i drafod o mewn gwirionedd na i fynd mewn i fanylion ac i grombil y peth. Felly, ar sail hynny, ac gyda llaw yn ola, ddaru Julian gyfeirio at y ffaith fod y gyllideb yma yn beth oedd y geiriad meeting pay and inflationary pressures. Dwi'n meddwl i fod oherwydd dros flwyddyn yn ôl, ddaru ni fel awdurdod ofyn am bapur ar gyflog byw go iawn. Mae'r papur yna o'n blaen ni heddiw ar ôl yr adroddiad yma. Os fysyn ni wedi cael y papur yna pryd oedden ni fod cyn y ha dwytha, fysyn ni'n trafod cyflog byw go iawn fel rhan o'r gyllideb yma. Dyda ni ddim. Felly mae'r cyfres yna o fethiannau yn dangos diffyg tryloeder, diffyg cyfathrebu yn golygu na allai yn sicr gefnogi unrhyw fath o gyllideb lle nad oes gynnau lais yno fo, a fysyn ni'n annog i bobl eraill hefyd i wrthod tan yn bod ni'n cael fwy o lais democrataidd yn y broses. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr. Mae gynnau chwaneg o, Julian, mae gynnau chwaneg o gwestiynau. Ydych chi eisiau cymryd 3?
That's fine with me, Chair, however you want to handle it.
Wel, i ni gael gweld be ydyn nhw, ia? Na i weld be sgyn y cynghorydd Paul Penlington i ofyn.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to reiterate what Mabon said, really. I don't feel like I've had anything like the amount of information I need to make a judgment today. You're asking us to vote for a budget that will pretty much increase council tax on a Band D property to around about £1,500, which is more than most people get in a month in Denbighshire. You're asking us to vote on that without the information we need to make a decision like that. As Mabon said, years ago, we would have days and days and days to go through the budget line by line by line to say what we thought could go, what could be saved, what could be cut, and all the rest of it. This is a take and leave it budget, and I'm personally going to leave it. But also, I think it's high time we acknowledge the fact that certain governments, like Westminster government, seem to have billions and billions of pounds to play with for their friends, for track and trace services and things like this. They've got £100 billion to spend on HS2, which we're expected to contribute to, which will have no benefit to Wales whatsoever. It's not even coming into Wales. I think we need to stand up and say enough's enough and challenge Westminster to say fund Wales properly and stop expecting our residents to pay a month of their wages to prop them up. And my question, actually, to boil it down to a question, you mentioned the impact of Brexit. I know most of the Conservative members here today were staunch supporters of Brexit, and I know today you say the impact of Brexit, not the benefits of Brexit. Could you perhaps tell us what the impacts are going to be?
Diolch, Paul. Cynghorydd Eryl Williams. Eryl, da chi ne?
Doedd, Mr Cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr. Os ar yr un swydd?
Wel, mae mewn ffordd, yn yr pwyllgor rhagfyr, nes i ofyn am be oedd School Budget Forum yn ei ddweud, a dwi wedi cael rhan o'r ateb, ond dwi hefyd yn teimlo bach yn bryderus bod ni ddim wedi cael llawer o gyllideb cynt, os ni'n licio gwybod bod yr School Budget Forum wedi cefnogio. Cyfarfod gweithio ddowain, o hynny ddim yn y papurau gatho ni, so mae'r ateb i ddod o fanna. So dyna nghwestiwn ni.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Eryl Williams. Ac un arall, a dim mae'r pedwar wedi cael gofyn, Cynghorydd Glenn Swingler. Glenn?
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate. So I've got a load of feedback. I'm going to reiterate what Mabon and Paul have said, particularly about this budget. We've seen nothing. What are we voting on? A few lines on a piece of paper. We see again that individual schools are being asked to cut another 1% off their own budgets. I don't think that's the right time to be doing that. The schools are in got enough problems going on without having to work out where to save more money. The council tax, we've put up council rents again and service charges, council tax on top. I think where possible, we should be looking to absolutely limit the amount of council tax we charge the people at the moment. Still a lot on furlough, a lot of people losing their jobs. We've seen the unemployment figures again this morning. There's a lot of hardship out there, and we should be doing whatever we can. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Glenn. Felly, dyna y pedwar cwestiwn. Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Julian Thompson Hill. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Oh, hang on, I'm getting feedback now myself. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I think probably most of the questions revolve around the same themes, so I won't select individual councillors to direct this to. I think I addressed within my presentation the fact that we weren't able, and I freely admit, we weren't able to do what we usually do in terms of the work. No authority has been able to do that because of COVID. We just simply have not been in that position. We've had no information. I mean, you know, a member said that the budget session was a waste of time. That wasn't certainly my feedback from other members with regards to that. It was certainly, we were presenting what information that we have available to us at the time. That's all we can do. That is all we can do. It's slightly ironic because actually Steve and I had been discussing before we went into lockdown at the beginning of last year what we were going to do for the process this year, and it was actually going to be an expanded process. But that just was not physically possible to be able to do, and to expect otherwise, I think, is being naive in the extreme, if I've got to be honest. There was a comment with regards to the real living wage. As we all know, obviously it's the next but one item on the agenda. And as members are aware, and I'm not going to prejudge my introduction to that one, the level of real living wage isn't set until November, so having a discussion in the summer would have been meaningless, which is why it was always intended to come in at this time of year, and that's what we've always agreed that we would actually do over the last couple of years. And obviously that's a separate decision that we need to take it, you know, later on in the agenda. Let's see what else I've got on here. I'm not going to comment on any national questions because obviously that's not relevant to the debate that we're here for today. We were asked about impact of Brexit. As I explained, perhaps not clearly, it is an unknown that we're facing. There may well be no financial impact, positive or minus. It could be a positive benefit, it could be a negative. We don't know. That's why it's prudent to include that as part of the contingency element that I'm proposing that we put forward. That's one element. COVID is another, and the late settlement is another element towards that. It's being prudent to allow to do that, to just not put in a contingency would really be a self-defeating tactic, I have to say. In terms of the school budget forum, I think Steve did say he'd had a further discussion with them recently, subsequent to the meeting, and they're aware of the requirement, as they have been for some time, in terms of the saving, and they're also aware of the additional funding that's being put into their budgets, and I'm perfectly sure that they're not jumping up and down saying, "Oh, thank you, I'd love a 1% reduction in my budget," any more than any of our other services were saying, "Please, can I reduce my budget?" But I think they accept the fact of the real world fact of where we are, and as do our own internal services. In terms of council tax levels, I actually agree with you, Glenn. I think I said that for me that council tax should be the absolute bare minimum that it actually is to be able to deliver the services. If you wanted to reduce it lower than that, that is entirely a decision for members, and that I suppose goes to the nub of it. That is the decision that members are being asked to vote upon. not the individual proposals. That isn't actually a council function. I'm sure Gary will correct me if I'm wrong on that. What we are here today to vote upon is the overall package and the level of council tax. Were we not to be increasing council tax to that level, and I very much wish that we could have a lower council tax level to put less of an impact on our residents. The only knock-on effect from that is that we would have to be putting forward more cuts onto residents. And to be quite frank, having been through the process, even if we were to bring forward some of the ones that we didn't think were appropriate, they would be unlikely to be able to deliver savings in any event. So it's not an ideal scenario. I put my hands up to that in terms of what we haven't done that we've done in years past. But what we've done given the circumstances that we and all public bodies in Wales have faced, and we're not treating anything in any different manner to anybody else. And just one final point: if any member or group of members had wished to put forward alternatives, they can at any time do that, and nothing has been raised with either myself or, to the best of my knowledge, with Steve about that. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n meddwl bod Glenn Swingler wedi dangos dod I mewn. Diolch yn fawr, Glenn.
Yeah, sorry, just to come back to you there, Julian. Sorry about this, but you're saying if we had any other proposals, we could have put them forward, at any point. We didn't even know what the proposals are, and that's the problem. That's at the crux of the whole thing, that we weren't given any details to make any changes. We can't propose different levels of council tax or anything because we don't have the figures in front of us to work it all out. That's it. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. Sorry, neb arall dwi'n meddwl. Mabon eisiau dod nôl? Na'n iawn, dyna fo. Felly, os na neb arall yn dangos diddordeb, gawn ni fynd i'r bleidlais, os na rwy'n yn cynnig rhywbeth.
Chair, I'll do the proposition, please.
Dyna fo, mae di cynnig yn cynghorydd Julian Thompson-Hill. Eilydd?
I'll second it, Chair. Richard Maynon.
Richard, diolch yn fawr, Richard. Felly, awn ni i'r bleidlais. Be di'r gorau? Mae o'n anodd, dwi'n gwybod. Be am fynd I ymatal?
Cadeirydd, ydy, os mae wedi cael ei cynnig a cael ei eilio, os da chi'n ar rhywbeth bwysig fel hyn, ofyn I bawb sydd eisiau ddangos o blaid, a wedyn ofyn am yn erbyn ag ymatal.
Nawn ni I fod yn glir. Dyna fo. Pawb sydd o blaid, eitem 5, y gyllideb, newch chi ddangos y nawr.
I thought we were going to go through them by name, actually, Chair, but I'm quite happy to do it this way.
Wel, so neb di gofyn am enwa.
Sorry, I thought that was what Gary was recommending.
If you want a recorded vote, then 1/6 of the members present need to indicate that they want a recorded vote, and if that's the case, then I've got the forms and I can go through it. It's a matter for members.
Can I propose that? I'll suggest we do a recorded vote.
Na eilio.
Mae di cynnig, pwy sy'n cynnig? Ac eilydd o Mabon dim ôl, ia?
Ie, so da ni isio ddigon o aelodau I ddangos fod nhw isio gael.
Newch chi ddangos wan os ach chi angen am fynd am y cynnig yna. Newch chi gyfri y swyddogion? Digon, dyna fo.
Sorry, Mr Cadeirydd,
Ie, diolch yn fawr.
8 o'r aelodau di ddangos fod nhw o blaid cofnodi'r bleidlais. Wedyn mae hwn wedi cael ei cario. So, da chi eisiau mi...
Snowkey Gary.
Okay. Members will be aware of the purpose of a recorded vote, but just if there are any people watching the meeting who don't understand, this is where I read out a register of councillors' names and they indicate how they would vote, either for, against, or to abstain. So, na I fynd drwyddo o'r gychwyn, Cynghorydd Mabon Ap Gwynfor.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Brian Blakely. I think we've had his apologies.
Yeah.
Councillor Joan Butterfield, I think we've had apologies. Councillor Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones.
For.
Da chi di weld o? O blaid, ia.
Councillor Ellie Chad.
Ellie?
For.
O blaid.
Cynghorydd Ann Davis.
For.
Councillor Gareth Davis.
O.
Cynghorydd Mary Lloyd Davis.
Ymatal.
Cynghorydd Hugh Evans.
O.
Councillor Peter Evans.
Peter?
For.
Councillor Bobby Feely.
For.
Councillor Tony Flynn.
For.
Councillor Rachel Flynn.
For.
Cynghorydd Hugh Hilditch Roberts.
O blaid.
Councillor Martin Holland.
For.
Councillor Hugh Irving.
For.
Councillor Alan James.
Alan, we're not getting it. Is your mic on? No, it's off. There we are. Alan.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. Sorry, technical hitch. Reluctantly for.
Councillor Brian Jones.
For.
Councillor Tina Jones.
For.
Councillor Pat Jones.
Pat?
No.
She's sent apologies.
Yeah, she's apologised.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Cynghorydd Gwyneth Kensler yn absennol.
Absennol.
Cynghorydd Geraint Lloyd Williams.
For.
Councillor Richard Maynon.
For.
Councillor Christine Marston.
For.
Councillor Barry Mellor.
For.
Councillor Melvin Mile.
For.
Councillor Bob Murray's absent. Cynghorydd Mervyn Parry.
O blaid.
Councillor Paul Penlington.
Paul?
Oh, sorry, against.
Councillor Peter Prendergast.
Peter?
Okay, I'll take it that he's not here. I'll move on. Cynghorydd Arwel Roberts.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Anton Sampson.
For.
Councillor Peter Scott.
For.
Councillor Glenn Swingler.
Against.
Councillor Tony Thomas.
For.
Councillor Andrew Thomas.
For.
Cynghorydd Rhys Thomas.
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Julian Thompson Hill.
For.
Councillor Graham Timms.
Graham? You were there a minute ago. No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, go on.
Councillor Joe Welsh.
For.
Councillor Cheryl Williams.
For.
Cynghorydd David Williams.
Dydy David ddim yma, oedd o methu
Ocê.
cymryd fel.
Diolch. Cynghorydd Errol Williams.
Yn anffodus ymatal.
Cynghorydd Hugh Williams.
O blaid.
Cynghorydd Emrys Wyn.
Emrys?
Yn erbyn.
Councillor Mark Young.
For.
I just cyfri nhw.
Iawn, da ni'n cyfri nhw.
Dwi wedi cyfri nhw, Cadeirydd. O blaid 30, yn erbyn 6, yn ymatal 2.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly, da chi wedi clywed dyfarniad? Diolch yn fawr. Dyna ni. 30 o blaid, 2 yn ymatal a 6 yn gwrthod. Felly mae hwnna wedi'w dderbyn. Diolch yn fawr i chi gyd. A dwi'n meddwl mai y cynghorydd Julian Thompson-Hill sydd yn cyflwyno rhif 6. Diolch yn fawr, Julian.
Take it off mute would help, wouldn't it? Yes, I'm afraid it's me again. Hopefully this one shouldn't take as much time for you. This is the annual report in relation to the council tax reduction scheme. I did refer to it briefly in the previous report. You'll be aware that going back to 2013, the former council tax benefit was replaced by what is now called the council tax reduction scheme. And when that was introduced, essentially Welsh Government wanted to proceed on an all Wales basis. So essentially the policy essentially agreed, but we have to approve it by the end of January each year. Section 4.2 details a couple of areas where there's been uprating in the policy to take into account of amendments since last year. 4.3 excuse me, are some additional inclusions within the proposals for additional categories. And 4.4 is actually the three only areas where we have discretion and we actually have to make a choice. And the recommendation that is before you would be that we would continue to do what we've done in previous years and approve those. In general terms, just to put it in context, as I say, this was transferred essentially into the RSG back in 2013, and at that time the level of claim was just shy of £9 million. The current level for the current financial year we're in at the moment, we're actually spending £10.6 million, and that will go up to nearly £11 million next year, which is why each year part of the unavoidable pressures list, and it was included within this proposals which I highlighted, we have to put in additional top up in order to make sure that that's actually covered. So for the coming year, we just agreed that £350,000 in addition of base budget would be included to balance that off. There's now actually a shortfall of in excess of £2 million that we're actually having to put in on top of what we get from Welsh Government. So that becomes a year-on-year pressure that we have to address. Otherwise, as I say, it is a procedural document. The only elements we have to make a decision on are A, B, and C within section 4.4, which in previous years we have agreed to, and I would recommend that we continue to agree to. So that's all I've got to say, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Gai jyst ofyn cwestiwn cyn i ni fynd ymhellach. Da chi wedi sôn am 4.4? Does gynna i ddim 4.4, dwi'n meddwl, yn y rhif 6. Mae un fi'n gorffen yn 4.2 cyn mynd ymlaen i 5. Dwi'n gwybod ydy'r Saesneg yn wahanol, Prif Weithredwr?
Ydy Mawan, Cadeirydd, dwi'n siŵr beth sydd wedi digwydd efo chi. Mae'r Saesneg yn rhedeg at 44 sydd yn gorffen ar tudalen 38 yn y Saesneg.
Wel, dwi ar tudalen 40 a dos gynna i ddim. Felly mae hwnna'n eisiau gywiro.
Rhaid fod tudalen ddim wedi cael ei brintio.
Wel, mae 42, a dos yn byd wedyn.
OK.
Na, gwes.
OK.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Mae'n ymddangos mae camgymeriad ydi o yn yr ddogfen Gymraeg. Felly, allwch chi jyst fynd drwy 4.4 eto i drwy gradau fel fi?
Yes, sure. 4.4, I'll just get to it myself. So the first one is the ability to increase the standard extended payment period of 4 weeks given to people after they return to work when they have been in receipt of a relevant qualifying benefit for at least 26 weeks. B is discretion to disregard part or the whole amount of war disablement pensions and war widows pensions when calculating income. And C is the ability to backdate for up to 6 months any application for council tax support awards for working age customers more than the standard period of 3 months prior to the claim. So those are the 3 elements that we actually have discretion over, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr iawn chi, Julian, am y cymorth yma ne. Felly, os yna rhywun eisiau gofyn cwestiwn, neu ydych chi'n barod i fynd i'r argymhellion, rhif 3. Os yna rhywun wedi dangos? Na. Felly, os yna rhywun am gynnig, ydych chi'n cynnig, Julian, bod ni'n derbyn?
I am indeed, Chair.
Eilydd?
I'll second them, Chair.
Martin Owen, diolch yn fawr, Martin. Felly, awn ni'r bleidlais. Pwy sy'n erbyn? Os yna rhywun yn erbyn, mae'n neud yn hawsach ar hwn. Na. Rhywun yn ymatal? Felly, nawn ni gymryd bod chi gyd yn derbyn yn gyflawn eitem 6. Beth yw'r argymellion da ni wedi bod drwyddyn nhw i fyny i 4.2. Diolch yn fawr. Ymlaen felly i 7. Wel, wrach fasa'n gyfle cyn i ni fynd i 7, dyd y gwir. Dwi'n siŵr bod chi eisiau paned, asred, a chi eisiau berwyr tegell ac yn y blaen. Be am rhyw chwarter awr, 10 munud, chwarter i, felly. Diolch yn fawr. Croeso nôl, a diolch i chi am y toriad bach yna, hyfryd cael paned. Eitem 7, dwi'n meddwl, da ni nesaf. Ac cynghorydd Julian Thompson-Hill sy'n cyflwyno. Efo Sophie Vaughan, neu Steve Gadd. Julian?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, it's me again.
All right.
Okay. As was mentioned earlier, this is the 2nd or 3rd year that we brought a paper at this time of year in relation to the real living wage. Just to give a little bit of background, as you'll see in the paper, there was a national living wage, which is the legally enforceable minimum wage that all employers have to pay, which obviously we comply with as an employer, which is currently at £8.72 per hour. And there was also the real living wage, which is assessed by the Living Wage Foundation, group of academics, updated each November. Last November, the rate was increased on this to £9.50 per hour. These things are always further complicated by the fact that the national pay discussions and the final national pay award always come out much later in the year again, depending on when the negotiations are concluded. There were two elements to the report that are in front of you. The first one is actually the real living wage and how that applies to our pay scale in Denbighshire. And then there's the wider issue with regard to accreditation as a real living wage employer. In terms of Denbighshire, you'll see from the report, sorry, this is going to get a little bit technical. You'll remember there was about 2 years ago, I think it was, there was a total restructure of the grading point, and it removed a lot of the lower scales, so that for a couple of years the bottom scale was automatically above the real living wage advised figure. Grade 1, which only has one get my teeth in, spiral column point, which is SCP1, is currently paid at £9.25 per hour, and grade 2 SCP2 is currently paid at £9.43 per hour. So those are the only two grades of staff that are being paid currently below what the Living Wage Foundation recommends. I'm sure you'll be aware that the UK government spending review was talking about a pause on public sector other than NHS staff pay. That, of course, that might well be national government's indication. However, in strict legal terms, the pay scale is negotiated by the local government association as the employer, and that actually would not be binding upon them in their negotiations, and those negotiations are ongoing. Again, you'll see in the report that in those two SCP bands 1, 2, we have 725 staff that are affected by that, 657 on SCP1 and 68 on SCP2. You'll also see from the Chief Financial Officer's report, were we of a mind to increase those two SCP points to the £9.50 minimum, that would have a financial impact of £37,458 plus on costs. We have, well, not just us, any employer has 6 months after the November announcement to implement any increase. And it probably, given the wider financial situation we find ourselves in with COVID, if we were to implement it in year, that would obviously create an additional in-year pressure. So it would be more advantageous to perhaps utilize the 6-month period and bring it in at that period in the new financial year. In terms of the wider situation, you'll see that there is an option to become an accredited real living wage employer. What that would actually mean is that we would be, by doing that, we would be bound to implement any recommended increase, regardless of whether we could actually afford to do that at any time. And also, we would be required to ensure that all contractors and providers also were paying at the same level. Now that, of course, has a significant financial impact attached to it. Just in terms of residential nursing sector alone, and that's only one sector that would be hit, it would be in excess of £1 million additional that we would need to find were we to do that. And given our financial situation and the budget we just agreed, I just don't see there's any way that we could actually do that. So I'll hand over to Sophie now to either correct what I've said or to add anything. And then I'm sure we'll go over to any questions and any recommendations that you may have. Sophie?
Yeah, Sophie?
Thank you. Yeah, you've covered everything that I wanted to say, really. So I'll leave it open to questions.
Steve eisiau deud gair? Steve Gard?
Hi, yeah, no, not really. Julian's covered everything. Only to say that because it's been a strategy of Welsh Government with the pay negotiations to target those at the lower end of the pay scales as well. That's why we are so close anyway. So the decision on our pay is one of timing, I suppose, rather than in the past. It would have had a huge financial impact. That impact has actually decreased over the last couple of years because of the emphasis on making sure that the lower paid get a bigger percentage increase, and that's just been from the negotiations. It's been a strategy over a number of years with Welsh Government and local government employers within the negotiations. So it's slightly different this year as we're coming together.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly, awn ni i'r cwestiynau. Mae gennau ddau wedi cysylltu ddoe, a mae gennau Glenn Swingler oedd y cyntaf. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, diolch yn fawr. We first raised this as Plaid Cymru back in 2017. We said then that we didn't expect to become a real living wage employer overnight, but that we'd like to work towards it, and that's why we keep getting this back every year. Excuse me, just a moment, sorry. I've got a technical issue here. Yeah, we raised this back in 2017. We're not expecting this to come straight away. We've wasted another year this year now because we've already voted on the budget without considering the real living wage aspect. So that'll be another year lost. We would also, you know, we're talking about the social care aspect of that. These are our frontline workers that have been working extremely hard under dangerous situations, you know, over the last year or so. And to give them a real living wage would surely be something we should be aiming for. Now, what I've not seen yet is a roadmap to how we do become a real living wage employer. We just keep being told, oh, we can't afford it this year, we can't afford it this year. Where, you know, give us some sort of roadmap. That's what we asked for back in 2017, and we've still not received that. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Glenn. Nesa, Graham Timms, diolch i mewn, Cynghorydd Graham Timms.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. I'm sorry, I lost internet connection totally, and I've joined on my iPad now via 4G. I've just managed to circulate 3 proposals that I'd like to add to the recommendations to councillors. And just to say, just to correct Glenn, actually, first of all, it was a Labour motion, actually, that first brought up, but I don't want to fall out about that because I think it's an important issue and we don't want to get caught up in party politics. We've talked about it for 3 years, and everyone's familiar with the idea of the real living wage and the government's so-called living wage, which George Osborne's named after the original minimum wage. He changed the name of it, but again, politics, let's keep out of politics for the moment because there's a really important issue here for our lowest paid staff. The initial discussions that we had looked at the NJC scales that the county use, and after After we had those initial discussions, the following year, the NJC minimum scale went to £9, which was the minimum wage, the real living wage. So it's automatically resolved itself without any need to make any more resolutions at the council for our own personal the people employed by the county council. However, as we know, last April 2020. The minimum on the pay scale went 5p below the real living wage of £9.30. Now, under a normal situation, I think we would have looked at that, and we were supposed to receive a report from the lead member for finance about that to see what we were going to do about it as a council. We didn't at our last council meeting, though. Councillors approved the new pay scale, where we fell yet again below the real living wage for our workers that pay the minimum, are paid the minimum. In order to rectify that, it would mean paying them 5p an hour more. Now, I know that's only a small amount. It works out to just under £100 a year, I think, on the pay scale. However, to the people who are receiving this, it's not a small amount. It's a matter of being able to afford or not afford to live a decent life. Now, the recommendation from the Real Living Wage Foundation comes out in November each year, and as Julian says, those following it wouldn't be expected to put it in until 6 months later. They'd get 6 months in order to implement that. Now, this is plainly daft for us to revisit this every year as a council and talk about, oh, is this 5p or this 5p or 20p or whatever. It needs to have a proper policy. And so what I'm proposing on proposal 2 is that we go back to April 2020 and put the scale 1 pay up by 5p an hour. Now that will cost us, scale 1 being the only ones that are affected by this, that will cost us as a council £17,624.43 plus on costs, £17,000, nearly £18,000. The county pay bill is £106 million plus on costs. 17,000 we're asking for to uphold this principle. That's the first recommendation. The second recommendation that we'd like to add is to pay at least the real living wage for next year, because November's already passed. The Real Living Wage Foundation have said that the real living wage has gone up now to £9.50, and so employers will have to start paying it at the latest by the end of April next year. Our pay round comes in April next year on 2021, and I'm proposing that we put the bottom rate of pay up to the £9.50. Now, just to get the scale of what the council would be committing to there, Rishi Sunak, in his autumn statement in November, said that there would be a public pay freeze. However, those under £24,000 would go up by £250 minimum. And that means that the pay of our scale 1 workers would go up to £9.38 is my calculation on that. Now, if we were to put it up, it's going to cost us another it's going to cost us £37,000 from April 2021 to 22. So in other words, it's costing us 17,000 for this year's pay, 37,500 for next year's pay. We can't keep revisiting this as a council. It's not the way to run a pay scale. So the final proposal is that the council make an informed decision on a move to becoming a real living wage employer. and in order to do that, I want to propose that the lead member for finance brings a report back to the council with a costing and a way forward. So as we talked about, I think Glenn mentioned a roadmap of how we're going to get there. We know it's going to cost £1.1 million or so, but let's see what the future roadmap is. So I'm suggesting, first of all, put pay to 930 this year, put pay to 250 next year, and then let's have a roadmap by the end of this year, put to council by the lead member for finance. Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Os ga I ofyn I Gary, ydy cael hwnna lawr, na I ofyn y ddarllen allan I chi gael gweld bod o'n dderbyniol.
Mr Chairman.
Hello?
Could I second that proposal, please?
Well, when I've had it clearly set out, yes. Diolch yn fawr, Gary.
Okay, so as I understand it, there would be 3 additional recommendations. The first one would be to backdate to April 2020 the real living wage amount for those who would have lost out under the last pay deal at a cost of £17,000 per annum. Number 2 would be to guarantee to pay the real living wage that was set in November 2020 for, do apologise, somebody's trying to ring me on my laptop. Sorry, number 2 was, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Number 2 was that that for financial year 2021-22, we pay the real minimum wage as set in November 2020 for all staff who would otherwise be below it, and that would cost £37,500. And the third recommendation, as I understood it, was a proposal that the lead member of finance brings back a report to council for a costing and a route map of how the council could become an accredited real living wage employer. Is that what was being proposed?
Chair, could I ask if people have received the email with the details on that I've sent?
Can I just, sorry, I really don't think the council is supposed to make decisions on the basis of the papers that are put before it. Papers that are being emailed around during a meeting that I haven't had sight of, I'm sure Steve Gadd hasn't had sight of, and that the public who are viewing the meeting won't have had sight of. It's not an appropriate way to conduct ourselves. So if members are going to be relying on information that's not been put in the public domain or that has not been had a chance for any advice to be given on, then I would caution against that.
I apologise, Chair. I just thought it would be helpful because I've got the recommendations written down there for people to actually see rather than having that was my point. I apologise for that, Chair.
Iawn, Graham. Os newch chi, ydych chi'n hapus efo be mae Gary Williams wedi ddarllen allan, neu si eisiau cywiro neu newid rhyw air yma gacw?
Iawn, diolch.
Iawn, dyna fo. Thank you, Barry. Diolch, Barry. Am eilio, felly mae di gynnig, mae di eilio fel gwelliant, neu ydy o'n lle hwn?
Wel, dwi'n gymryd, Mr Cadeirydd, fod wedi cael ei gynnig fel gwelliant, so yn ychwanegol i'r argymhellion sydd yna. Mewn materi aelodau trafod rwan.
Ydy rhif 3 ar y funud yn werth i ystyried? Ydy cael y 3 newydd? Os na nhw bleidleisio amdano, dwi'n dweud.
Wel, be da ni'n... Mae hwn yn gwelliant.
Ydy.
Mae hwn yn gwelliant. Mae wedi cael ei cynnig, mae wedi cael ei eilio.
Rhaid ni bleidleisio wedyn.
Rhaid i ni bleidleisio, wel, trafod a bleidleisio ar y gwelliant cyn i ni gael trafod neu bleidleisio ar unrhyw beth arall. Une yr argymell reiddiol neu welliant wahanol.
Dyna fo. Diolch yn fawr, Gary. Diolch yn fawr. Felly, mae wedi cael ei gynnig a'i eilio. Felly, awn ni'r bleidlais.
Chair, can I ask that Steve Gadd be brought in for the financial implications, please?
Sorry, what I was going to say, Mr. Chair, you've had a mover and a seconder, but that needs to be debated. And to be fair, I think the finance officer is entitled to come back on that.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Ceri. Felly, os yw rhywun eisiau codi ar y cynnig yma? Catrin Roberts?
Chair.
Wedyn, ia. Ia, pwy sy'n... Yes, Catrin, yeah.
Hi, thank you.
Mewn, Catrin.
Da chi'n clywed fi?
Da'n iawn, wan.
Okay. Yeah, if I could just come in on the revised proposal. The first one, which is around paying the real living wage going back to April last year, doesn't raise any issues in terms of equality between, the different grades, etc., or the relativities between the grades. However, the second proposal to pay the real living wage for spinal column point 1 and 2 from April this year does cause, or could potentially cause, issues around equal pay, in as much as spinal column point 1 is grade 1 as determined by the job evaluation scheme, and spinal column point 2 is grade 2 as determined by the job evaluation scheme. So I think before we agree to that, we would need to have a look at the risk that potentially will cause the council due to equal pay. So I think personally, I'd prefer if we could go away and do a little piece of work on that first before we agree to anything. And then just coming in on the roadmap. By all means, we can look into what it would mean to become a real living wage employer and present that to you as a plan of action.
Graham, newch chi ddod I mewn ar hwnna? Be da chi'n feddwl?
Chair, yeah. If I could just say that the calculation based on the second one about next financial year, what I did was I added £250 to scale 1 and scale 2. Scale 1 then goes up to 18,092, and scale 2 goes up to 18,448, which means that it will be, scale 1 would be paid £9.38 a year, 12 pence less than the £9.50, and scale 2 would be on £9.56, so it would already be above. Taking the differential between one and the other, £9.50 on scale 1 and £9.56 on scale 2. That was my reasoning on that one.
Ydych chi'n meddwl, Catrin?
I think it's just in terms of, we would need to understand exactly what was being offered in terms of the pay going forward from April, in terms of any pay award, etc. So that would be my only comment there.
Chair, would it be possible for us to vote on the first recommendation and the third recommendation that we're proposing, and the second recommendation about the pay from April, that a decision be made at next council on that one? That gives Steve and Sophie time to have a look at it in detail, and possibly there'll be announcements from the Welsh Government before then, and it won't even be necessary.
Diolch yn fawr, Graham. Be ydych chi'n feddwl, Gary? Cywiro yr ail gynnig I fynd ymlaen i'r cyngor nesaf a pleidleisio ar 1 a 3.
Yeah, so what essentially we'd be doing then is we'd be the amendment would be that we would for the council to backdate pay of spinal column point 1 back to April 2020 at the real living wage rate for that period, and that there be a report back to council in February in terms of the impact and consequences of agreeing to pay the real living wage in the coming financial year. And then number 3 would be as was. Is that what's being proposed?
Yeah.
I perhaps just need to check with Catrin and Steve if that's doable by then.
Chair, can I just come in?
Ie, mae'n... Mae'n ddrwg gynnau. Ie, diolch i mewn, Catrin a Steve, dwi'n meddwl, ia? Jyst ar y pwynt da ni newid drafod.
Catrin, do you want to go first?
In terms of whether it's doable for February or the next council, it will be dependent on when we get any information in relation to the pay award next year, which might not be February. Nor, you know, in the past it could be as late as sort of May, June, July before we've had that information. So it is dependent on when we get that information.
Okay, Chair, can I come in? Yeah, just on the recommendations 1 and 2, as just pointed out, I think obviously the this year's straightforward. If the recommendation says something like we commit to being to match real living wage each financial year, but pending the local government pay settlement, because if we do anything before the local government pay settlement, we're liable to get ourselves in a right pickle, because as it's been pointed out, the pay settlement, we have no idea what it's going to be. I've put an estimate into the budget, and I've put in enough in the budget to cover what I felt might come out of this meeting, so that the budget isn't a reason for not doing any of this. But just as far as the process is concerned, to bottom it off for years going forward, we can then plan that actually we can build that into the budget every year and the process every year. But those members of staff will be treated like every other member of staff and will be have their pay rise backdated as and when the final pay settlement for that year is agreed. But we'll adjust that pay settlement to ensure that the lowest paid are above that real living wage every year, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Catrin?
It does. I think the complication is that where it affects the next level up, if you want. So we need to make sure from a pay perspective that the relativities are there from one grade to the next. And it gets complicated when, say, grade 1 or grade 2 gets to the point where it's as much as those on grade 3, for example. And that causes us issues then in terms of equal pay. And actually, if we got to that point, we'd have to probably relook at a whole pay structure to make sure that we've got the different scales that recognise the differences in the jobs effectively. So it's not as it isn't as straightforward as just saying that we will apply or we will match the real living wage, because it does have a knock-on effect on other people up the pay scales. And if you think back to, it's not that long ago that we settled all the equal pay issues, historical equal pay issues that we've had. So we need to be absolutely sure that we don't get ourselves into that position again. So I suppose my preference would be is something that we would, and I know it's not ideal, but it would be something that we would look at every year when we know what the pay award is going to be and we know what the real living wage is for that year. And then that way we can look at what impact it has on the rest of the pay structure and come up with a proposal on that basis rather than commit to it every year. And that was one of the reasons why, and not just us, but one of the reasons why the majority of the councils don't commit to being a real living wage employer, because they have no say over the pay, and effectively then they have to address the issues that it raises for the rest of the pay structure.
Chair, can I come in, please, Chair?
Yeah, pwy sy'n siarad?
Yeah, Councillor Mark Young.
Diolch yn mewn.
Yes, can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to raise an issue that obviously when money's tight, and I've just noted that the First Minister has urged the public sector last year to pay the real living wage. Wouldn't it be appropriate that we ask, as part of this process, that the government put the money where the mouth is and pay for it? So I do want to bring that in, because it's okay for the First Minister to urge us, but you've seen how tight the money is, and he's saying they deserve it because of the work they're doing in the pandemic. Well, I think they should get it, but I think the government should fund it, and I'd like that as an amendment, please. Jock and vow.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, are you looking at the hands up or just taking people who shout out?
Allwch chi'n cael gwelliant ar welliant, felly nawn ni ddelio efo'r welliant yma gyntaf. Awn ni nôl i'r gwelliant da chi wedi sôn amdano fo, os fydd rhaid. Ond mae yna bobl eraill wedi dangos bod nhw eisiau dod i mewn. Judith, dewch chi mewn. Prif Weithredwr.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, I think members, the intention is quite clear. Well, from yourself, it is anyway, Councillor Timms. But equally, I'm hearing some slight nervousness from our two key officers around finance and HR. And what I'd urge you today really is just to allow us to go back and do some more work to make sure that you're in the possession of the full information that you need to make a decision before you do. That would be my plea to you today, really, is just to set out what piece of work you would like to carry out before we come back to you and make a decision. But of course, it is a matter for yourselves.
Chair, Chair, can I try and be helpful then?
Well, we've got other speakers. I don't know if they want to come in, but
yes, I would like to come in, please, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Bobby, mae gennai fobl o'ch blaen chi. Ond os da chi eisiau dod i mewn, dewch i mewn wan, cyn...
That's okay. I didn't realise you had me on your list. I thought it was just people shouting out.
Chair, as the proposer, I want to try to be helpful, if I may.
Diolch, Graham. Dedwch chi wan.
I'd like to suggest that we move ahead with recommendation, the first recommendation, that the real living wage is paid to all council employees in 2020, basically, isn't it? The 925 to 930 increase for scale 1. I'd like to press ahead with the request for the lead member of finance to bring a report back to council to outline a roadmap. But the middle recommendation, I think that what I'm hearing is that the finance officers would like to consider that and bring that back to council. And I think that's thoroughly sensible. I am very much against politicising this by Mark Young's suggestion that we go back to the Welsh Government and start doing that, because, you know, we can start talking about where does the Welsh Government come from. We don't want to do that, and let's keep it out of this debate if we could, please, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Barry, da chi'n hapus efo'r newid? Dal i eilio?
Yeah, I'm happy for second that proposal.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly, da chi eisiau mynd drwyddo fo eto? Mae wedi cael ei gywiro wan. Diolch, Gary.
Okay, I'll just, sorry members, it's me again. I'll just run through what I understand it to be then. The proposer and the seconder of the amendment have agreed that the first amendment would be that all council employees who were paid below the real living wage during the financial year 2020-21 would be paid at the real living wage level that was in place in April 2020. And that secondly, that the lead member for finance brings a report to council for a costing and potential route map in respect of how the council could become an accredited real living wage employer. And that effectively the second recommendation that was proposed is dropped, subject to further work taking place.
Diolch yn fawr, Gary. Dwi'n gwybod, mae gynna i enwa i ddod i mewn, felly na i ofyn i Hugh Irving gynta. Hugh? A wedyn Martin Hopland.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to hear what Gary has just said. I'm very pleased to hear what the proposer of the amendments has just conceded. Nevertheless, I do not like this principle of being bounced. And I feel we are being bounced this morning. We're working under difficulties. I can't get my laptop to work. I've only got my iPad. That means I've got no papers. We can't quickly have any interaction with our colleagues around us. And I feel the whole all items should go back for full and quiet reflection before they're considered and voted on. Thank you.
Wel, dwi'n siŵr bod ni'n ymddihiro am eich trafferthio chi. Mae mwy anodd, rhaid mi gydweld efo chi efo hynny, ac dwi'n ymddihiro ar ran y sir, ond da ni yn y sefyllfa rydyn ni, mae gynna i ofn. Martin, dewch chi mewn, Martin Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a concern again here. I've listened to the officers and potentially, what we're proposing at the moment is minor cost changes, but the HR position of if we go ahead with this and start manipulating the grades, it has a knock-on effect on other salary grades. Can I ask the question, if we, as Councillor Timms is suggesting, we backdate this to 2020, how does that affect the pay grades? Because if you're upgrading people at one end, there's a potential knock-on effect on the other. I really, again, would just prefer that we ask the officers to look at this and come back next month and tell us whether this is practical and what the potential knock-on effects could be. Thank you.
When we've got the living wage.
Diolch yn fawr. Mae Glenn di roi law fyny, yndi? Mae'n law I fyny. Diolch, Glenn. Glenn Swingler.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. All I'm hearing here is let's have some reflection. Let's go back and do some more work. This was what was supposed to have been started in 2017 when this first proposal came up. We're just going round and round in circles and kicking it in the grass year after year after year. Let's actually start doing something, please.
Diolch yn fawr. So, creu llaw I lawr rwan. Diolch yn fawr, Glenn. Rhowch na fo, diolch yn fawr. Wel, Gary, lle da ni'n sefyll rwan? Just I mi gael bod yn glir.
Meyrick,
Yeah?
Meyrick, you
Bobby?
still haven't asked me. Having waited, I have waited patiently.
Yeah, dewch I mewn. Dewch I mewn. Dewch I mewn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really want to ask a question, but I want to raise a point, and I feel duty bound to do so. And I'm talking about the public perception. Over the last year or so, because of COVID, there are so many small businesses, small business people, and large businesses which their employees have suffered. There has been mass layoffs and the unemployment has had a sharp rise. I am very worried about all the people that have been affected, and some of these businesses won't come back. They'll never come back. And the public perception of us discussing, which seems to be a lengthy discussion on whether or not to give a rise, which obviously will have a knock-on effect right across the scale, I find really worrying, really worrying. And I really don't think this is an appropriate time to be discussing this. The rest of you perhaps all think it's a grand idea, and it is. I'm not arguing with the principle at all. It's the timing.
Diolch yn fawr. Diolch. Mae Cynghorydd Rhys Thomas di gofyn am ddod I mewn rwan. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Cadeirydd. I think most of the things I was going to say have been said. I'm not going to argue politics with Councillor Timms, but I think we're agreed that we did start talking about this in 2017. So to answer what Councillor Bobby Feely has just said, if we'd actually implemented this in 2017 or 18, we wouldn't be in the situation of trying to implement it, she thinks, at a time when people are suffering lack of jobs and so on. But we are talking about the lowest paid workers, and I don't see the public would object to us paying these people a real living wage. We're not talking about the executives, we're talking about the lowest paid. My point is that when I think about whether something is going to cost a great deal to the council or not, my rule of thumb is whether it costs more or less than filling the salt bins. And this proposal, as we saw, was 37,000 with excluding on costs less than refilling salt bins. So it's a very long and an interesting discussion, but to anybody on the outside, it would seem that we are dragging our feet on this. So please, can we have a move on and start paying this real living wage? Thank you, Chair. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr, Rhys. So neb arall wedi dangos diddordeb ar y funud, felly na I ofyn I Gary eto fynd drwy be ddylen ni fod wan yn pleidleisio arno fo.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My understanding is that currently what you have in front of you are the following amendments. Firstly, that all council employees receive the real living wage for the financial year 2020-21, which would essentially involve backdating the pay of those on spinal column point 1, who were on £9.25 up to the £9.30, and that was explained would cost £17,000 for the year. And then the other recommendation you have is a proposal that the lead member brings back a report to council for a costing and a route map as to how the council would be able to become an accredited real living wage employer. I think in respect of the second amendment that have been put forward, it's been agreed that that would not go to the vote now, but that officers would do work on what the technical consequences would be of doing that in the financial year 21-22, which would be dependent upon, of course, the pay awards that may or may not be agreed in that time. So essentially, it is to backdate the pay for the current financial year for those below real living wage, and to bring a report back on a costing and a route map as to how the council could become a real living wage accredited employer. I think that's what everybody's talking about.
Wel, na I ofyn I Graham just ddeud ydy o'n derbyn hwnna rwan fel y gwelliant?
Yes, Chair. Yes, happy with that. But just regarding from April 21 to 22, that report presumably will be coming back as soon as possible.
Yes. Da chi eisiau rhoi dyddiad?
Well, sorry, I think Catherine explained that we're a bit in the dark about it until we get the information from the employers, the Joint Council of Employers and Employees as to the progress of those pay awards. I think what we can certainly undertake to do is that as that process goes on, and once we have an idea of what that's going to be, we would be able to bring something back to members to explain what the consequences would be on the basis of the pay award at the time. It may be that the pay award resolves the issue for you.
Diolch yn fawr. Be a'ch chi'n dweud, Graham? Da chi'n hapus?
Yeah, I'm happy with that, and I hope that that's taken any sort of worries that council members would have about these particular recommendations.
Dyna fo, diolch yn fawr iawn. Mae hwnna wwan yn barod I fynd i'r bleidlais. Os oes neb arall I weld, mae Martin dal ei law fyny. Da chi'n iawn, Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm more or less happy with what's being proposed now, but I did go back to that point, as if we're backdating this and therefore increasing the salary grades for staff back to April last year, can HR just confirm that that doesn't impact on all the other grades as well at this time? If that's the case, then I see no problem with what's being proposed at this stage.
Diolch yn fawr am hynny, Martin. Catherine, neu pwy fyna
Yeah,
Steve?
I'll come in on that if that's the case.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Catherine.
The rise would only be 5p, which takes it up to £9.30. And there's enough of a gap then from the £9.30 to the next final column point. So it doesn't cause us any issues for the last year.
Diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n meddwl bod hwnna'n digon clir rwan. Felly, awn ni'r bleidlais. Sut da ni'n mynd i wneud hwn? Pawb o blaid i gychwyn, dwi'n meddwl. Felly ni gael pawb sy'n mynd i ddangos. Llaw i fyny neu llaw yn y llun, ond y llaw fyny os ellwch chi. O blaid y gwelliant gyntaf, diolch yn fawr. Newch chi ddangos. Y gwelliant. Newch chi fod yn ofalus. Cadwch o fyny, mae yn cymryd mwy amser, mae gennai on.
It's definitely passed.
Da ni cael pawb?
It's definitely passed. I'd see if there how many were against, perhaps.
Ia.
It's definitely more than 50%.
Yn erbyn. Newch chi ddangos yn glir. Yn erbyn. Neb? Rwy'n yn ymatal. Be math o rif allwn ni roi? Da ni wedi cyfri, weddol agos, be di'r...
Mae'n anodd ar Zoom, achos
Mae'n anodd. Dyna fo, wel, mae'n dangos bod ni gyd wedi cydweld i dderbyn yr gwelliant. Felly, mae haid ni bleidleisio eto rwan ar gwelliant cadarnhaol, substantive motion.
Yes.
Yes,
Chair. Sorry to be the pedant in the corner.
No.
Essentially, what you've agreed to do is to amend the motion.
Yeah.
And therefore that becomes the substantive motion. And so that is the motion upon which you would vote. And so you would need to vote. Given the issues that we have with voting, it may be subject to what you consider, Chair and members, best just to ask if anybody wants to vote a different way to the way they voted on the amendment.
Diolch yn fawr, Gary, mae hwnna'n glir. Unrhyw un yn erbyn wan, derbyn yr argymhelliad sydd wedi cael ei gadarnhau fel gwelliant. Nag oes, felly os yna rhywun yn ymatal. Nag oes. Felly, da ni'n derbyn yr argymhelliad fel mae wedi cael ei gywiro ar hwnne. Felly, nawn ni edrych ymlaen am yr adroddiadau ac yn y blaen. Diolch yn fawr, mae ddrwg gennau bod ni mor hir, ond mae rhaid ni trio yn gorau fod yn gywir, a dwi'n ddiolchgar i chi am hynny. Nawn ni ymlaen felly i eitem 8. A dwi'n meddwl mae Glen Swingler, cynghorydd Gwen Swingler, mae ddrwg gennau Glen, sydd yn rhoi hwn ymlaen. Rhif 1.
Right, thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to point out that this motion is not about interfering in lead officers' powers. What it is that we call for the decision date on the intended restructuring of the homeless service with the loss of 9 posts to be postponed from February the 1st, 2021 until the reasoning behind the proposed major internal reorganisation has been examined by a council scrutiny committee. Now, in Plaid Cymru, we've obviously, like many of you, very supportive of the homeless support teams there, and we see housing homeless families as a priority. We supported the paper on homelessness that was presented to us during the last full council meeting without knowing about any of this restructuring that was going on. Now, the only reason we know about it now was obviously because somebody in that department went to the newspapers, and the unions aren't happy, clearly. Now, we are as councillors, we've got a corporate responsibility to our staff. And all we're asking is that the lead member assures that any final decision on this restructure will not take place on February the 1st as originally put out in this document, and only take place when this matter has been looked at by scrutiny or by cabinet. Firstly, one other thing, I'd like to thank Councillor Bobby Feely and the head of service in the homeless prevention team for meeting with our group last week to go over some of these points, but I'll leave that with you for now. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Glenn. Cynghorydd Bobby Feely eisiau ymateb?
Yes, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have got a fairly comprehensive response, as I'm sure, and I'm sure you'll understand it needs explaining thoroughly. So, as reported to Partnership Scrutiny Committee on the 5th of November 2020, the Welsh Government has developed a 3-phase plan to set out the priority areas and key principles that local authorities should consider and adopt as part of their strategic and operational planning for tackling homelessness, moving people on from emergency accommodation, and developing effective housing-related floating support and supported accommodations. Included in those papers, in that report, was a summary of the plan, which is required to have rapid rehousing at the heart of its services and utilise a range of support models, including Housing First, which is a high level of intensive activity 24/7 over a long period of time. Critical time interventions, more medium-term interventions with at least 1 to 3 interventions every week. Rapid rehousing and floating support is short-term, low-level intervention to get a household settled within their tenancy. Assertive outreach to engage with the most disengaged rough sleepers. Also included in the papers was information on how community support services intended to implement required changes to cope with these new regulations, which will include developing a multidisciplinary team consisting of mental health professionals, substance misuse worker, social worker and occupational therapist, prison liaison officer, probation staff, and counselling and physiotherapy lead. The restructure of the staffing model within the homeless prevention team to meet the needs of the new service. Further information was not provided at that time because, in line with council policy, a consultation exercise is required with all staff and unions to consider any changes involving personnel. The consultation was originally due to close on January the 20th. However, following discussion with the trade unions, this was extended to the 29th of January, following which community support services will consider the responses before reaching a conclusion by the end of February. Any changes to the team structure will be implemented by May 2021. The proposals as consulted would ultimately reduce the staff complement for homelessness and accommodation support by 1 post and 1 post only. Although there are a number of changed roles that require different qualifications and skills and which provide a more comprehensive response to the whole issue. In fact, to give my own opinion, my own view, I think it's probably likely that we will need more staff, not less. As members are aware, staffing structures are delegated to heads of service in the council's constitution, and the process does not involve member scrutiny, and this includes me as lead member. However, the lead member and the head of service can provide a report on any revised structure and an update on how this will enable the council to fill its responsibilities to citizens at risk of and experiencing homelessness at a suitable time. And I want to emphasise in conclusion that the the people at the heart of the work that's going on are the homeless people that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And they are the main people that we are thinking about during this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Glenn, da chi'n cael ymateb, dwi'n meddwl?
Mae hwn yn cynnig, so mae'n bosib gael trafodaeth. Da chi wedi cael y cynnig gan cynghorydd Glenn Swindler, a da chi wedi cael yr aelod arweiniol yn rhoi ymateb i'r cynnig. Cyn gael trafodaeth, da chi eisiau gael eilydd i'r cynnig. Os mae yna eilydd, wedyn gewch chi trafod y mater a wedyn mynd i'r bleidlais.
Ardderchog, diolch am y goleuni yna. Felly, os yna eilydd i'r cynnig gan cynghorydd Glenn Swindler.
Eilio.
Mae Bon yn eilio, dyna fo. Felly, ydych chi'n derbyn i ni drafod o?
Wel, fel unrhyw beth arall sydd yn dod i'r cyngor, mae'n cael cynnig, mae'n cael ei eilio.
Mae o'n cael ei drafod.
Gewch chi drafod.
Dyna fo. Newch chi, os yw rhywun eisiau codi unrhyw beth ynglyn â'r beth ydych chi wedi glywed o'r ddwy ochr.
Yes, if I may. Chair, Councillor Young.
Rhys, Thomas a Hugh Hildrich wedyn.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Cadeirydd. I think Councillor Mark Young has his hand up as well.
Dwi'n meddwl bod dwi wedi clywed y llais, ond da ni'n wedi gweld y llaw.
Okay.
Rhys?
A few days after the last full council, a consultation document was produced, as stated by Councillor Feely, and I don't really think that at full council is the time to go and discuss individual roles, so I'm not going to do that. But I have a list in front of me, and I won't name the roles, but here we have job role for review, deleted from structure, 2 jobs, 4 jobs reviewed and reduced to 3, home and another job deleted from structure. I'm sorry, you've had your turn, Councillor Feely. Chair, can I just continue, please?
Daliwch am munud, daliwch am munud. Allai'n cael chi'n siarad ar draws y gilydd.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'm not going to go into details, but I do feel that for a very hard-working homelessness team, who we all praised at our last full meeting, to receive a notice just before Christmas that they had to reapply for jobs because their existing job descriptions were being changed. I don't think that that's something that I think it was something that was hurried. It was just before Christmas, there was Christmas and there was New Year, and the decision is to be taken on the 1st of February. So all that this motion asks for is that that more time is given to discuss with the staff, and that if it's possible for it to come to scrutiny or to cabinet so that we know what's going to happen, because this is really more than just a change within a service. Some of the jobs which are to be created are people who are going to be seconded from outside. So it's far more than just a few job roles being changed. And all we're asking for, as people with a responsibility to our staff, is just for the department to take more time to look at this and to finish their discussions with the staff, because I believe there could be grave reputational damage to the council in the weeks to come if this matter isn't sorted out to everybody's benefit. We want the homelessness team to be more efficient. We want them to be able to prevent homelessness rather than having to solve the problems of people who've become homeless. And we just want reassurance that this is being done in the right way and it's not being rushed, because all indications are that it has been a very hurried process. So we're asking if Councillor Feely, as the lead member, can assure us that it won't be rushed through with a decision on the 1st of February, then we will be satisfied with that. And I don't mean delayed till the 2nd or the 3rd of February, but just to give everyone more time to make sure that these changes are ones that are going to be of benefit to people who are at risk of becoming homeless. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch, Rhys. Gary, ti eisiau dod i mewn?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a couple of general points I need to make about this. The first is that it's not rushed, and it's not the 1st of February. The lead members already indicated that the consultation period was extended and that a decision would be made by the end of February. The second thing I think I need to point out is that we have policies and processes for these things which are designed to comply with our legal obligations and to ensure that people are treated fairly. I have nothing in front of me that suggests that we've done anything other than follow our own properly adopted processes for dealing with this type of thing. I have to say that when considering staffing matters, these are matters that are delegated to, you employ people to do this, and you employ a whole HR service to support them to do it properly and fairly. And I think that you get into dangerous territory if we start to have discussions about staffing matters in public meetings where politicians are effectively trying to pause or halt a process that's being followed in accordance with our processes and procedures, which are legally compliant and which ensure that people are treated fairly. And I really do think that members should pause and think before they start getting involved in these matters. The issue that Councillor Feely pointed out was that the responsibility is to deliver the service in the best way that we can, and that is the purpose of the restructure. And members are perfectly entitled to scrutinise the outcomes of those services, what impact it has on citizens and residents, to ensure that we are providing the best service. But I really don't think it's appropriate for you to try and stop a proper lawful process that's been instituted in accordance with our procedures. Everybody involved will be treated fairly. Everybody involved has the right to be represented, and everybody involved has the right to appeal against decisions that are made under the process. And I think you should trust the processes that the council has adopted to ensure that people are treated properly.
Diolch, Gary. A Prif Weithredwr, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Chair. I mean, Gary said that the vast majority of what I was going to say, members, but equally I understand your concerns that this is a key service for the council. So can I suggest that it would be appropriate, rather than dealing with the details of the restructure, as Councillor Feely and Gary have just outlined, that it's something that perhaps you might want to look at in scrutiny in a few months' time to see how the new restructure has bedded in and how that's impacting on service performance and delivery.
Diolch, Prif Weithredwr. Mae gennau chwaneg o siaradwyr, felly cyn i ni fynd i'n pellach na I ofyn I Mark Young, Cynghorydd Mark Young.
Thank you, Chair. And Gary's answered most of it, but I just want to double check. After listening to what Gary's just said, is the motion bona fide? Because it sounds in conflict. So can we just have confirmation? Because I've heard what he just said. It makes sense. So my question is, should the motion go forward, because it sounds in conflict? Thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr, nawn ni ateb mewn munud. Hugh Hildridge, Roberts, gwelwch yn dda.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. First of all, can I thank Bobby for her response, comprehensive, and even though it is not a lead member's decision and the lead member is not involved in this process. Now, I've done what Gary's told me to do, pause and think. And let me tell you what I think, is that this motion wouldn't be here if it had been communicated correctly to members in the first place. This is an example, further examples that we've had already this week, that we're not getting information about what's happening operationally. There is a big divide and it needs to stop. And I actually would support this going to scrutiny because I don't know what's happening. I don't know what the effect on the homeless will be at the back end of this. And actually, there is a precedent where we did take economic development. I chaired the scrutiny many years ago on the effect it was going to have for the public. So I actually fully support the motion because it is important that members are not kept in the dark about what's happening in our council. Fully respect the process of restructure, is a head of service, no issues with that. But this wouldn't be here if we'd been communicated and seen sight of this earlier.
Can I come back on that, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
Bobby, yeah.
Just to say that we shared absolutely as much information as we were allowed to do during the process, short of going into the details of the restructure at the partnership scrutiny, which Jeanette chairs. So it was, we had as much in the general public knowledge as we could possibly have without compromising individuals. And I'm sure Gary can back me up on that.
Dwi'n siŵr geith o ddod I mewn mewn munud, Bobby. Mae gynna I ddau gynghorydd arall, y cynghorydd Glenn Swingler. Glenn, di'r law. Mabon ap Gwynfor.
Diolch. Just to take up a little bit of, well, reiterate what Councillor Hilders Roberts has said, but going back to what Gary has said, and thank you for the advice, Gary, but notwithstanding that advice, it seems to me that this is more than merely an operational matter, a restructuring or operational restructuring within the council. There seems to be here a service change, and therefore it requires high-level understanding and communication, because we as a council, as the body of the council and as councillors, will have to stand by this decision where there's a major service change, which is what is being proposed. And when there is a service change of this nature, then surely it's right for it to be scrutinised, not only scrutinised in public consultation, in consultation with the unions and with the staff, which is ongoing, and a wider consultation, expanded consultation, which is what the motion is asking, but also taken to a scrutiny committee so that the body, us, the council, understands exactly what is being proposed and then can hopefully support it, because if it's the right thing to do, then the body, the council, will understand the proposal and put its weight behind it. That's all that the motion is asking ultimately. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr. Rhys, os oes gen ti beth ychwanegol, neu dwi'n isio dal I fynd a dal I fynd?
Yeah, could I just correct on one thing? We did put a request for this to go to scrutiny. It went before chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny last Thursday, I think, and it was turned down. If it had gone to scrutiny, then we would have probably withdrawn this motion. So now to hear that it should go to scrutiny is certainly good news, but last week it wasn't good news that it went to scrutiny and it was turned down. So thank you.
Cael y neges, diolch I ti. Mae gen Gary eisiau dod I mewn. Diolch yn mewn, Gary.
Well, just to confirm, a request was made to scrutiny and it wasn't turned down. It was scheduled for the autumn to look at the outcome of the restructure. So there is an item that scrutiny chairs have agreed to take later on in the year to consider the outcomes of the change, to see how they're bedding in and to see what impact or benefits that residents and customers have seen from it.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly mae'n, ydw i'n iawn, os di Glenn yn... Oh, sorry, Jeanette. Yeah. Jeanette Chamberlain-Jones, diolch yn mewn.
Yes, thank you. We did have a good debate about this at our partnership scrutiny. We agreed it, but we did say that we would monitor it and it would come back. We did feel that the homeless and the situation that we have needed some expertise, which is already in the report. And I think, as Bobby said, we did need to be in some ways restructured, enabling us as an authority to actually do the very best we can for the rough sleepers and indeed the homeless. So I was hoping once this was up and running that we would bring it back to partnership to see exactly how it was going. So I'm a bit surprised of what's happening. And we did also agree, as been said, that we would review it again if the chairs and vice chairs. We didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
We are looking at it. And as Bobby rightly says, we do need to really look in depth at this. And it was agreed at the partnership scrutiny that we would do exactly what the report said. And we recommended that, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Mae hwnna di goleuo ni, dwi'n siŵr. Rhys, wyt ti'n derbyn yr gwyddor yna?
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd. Diolch am yr esboniad, Gary. I think the request we made was that it could go to scrutiny as soon as possible before the changes were made, but I understand that the scrutiny will look at it once this is in place and the staff changes have taken place, but I do hope that by then it's not too late and that we won't have lost specialisms from the department. Thank you, Chair. Diolch yn fawr.
We'll have gained.
Owen Williams, who?
Yeah, Dale Cadeirydd. Just one question is, are the jobs safe for the 10 members of staff who have been redeployed? I have somebody who lives in my ward and she's been offered a job on the bins or as a mechanic. These people will be deployed in suitable places.
Mae eisiau bod yn ofalus I beidio dangos pwy ydy neb, dwi'n meddwl.
Ys i'n menw I neb.
Na, ond os oes posib gweithio fo allan, mae hwnnw'n broblem hefyd, dwi'n meddwl. Neith Gary helpu fi yma. Gary, ddewch I mewn.
Diolch, Mr Cadeirydd. Yeah, it's not just about naming people, it's about giving information which might cause somebody with relevant knowledge to be able to identify an individual. That therefore becomes personal data, and we should not be discussing people's personal information in public.
Okay, sorry, I do apologise. But when they're crying on the phone to you before Christmas because they're losing the job for the second time. Thank you.
Na, da ni yn dall, ond ti'n dall, da ni o fewn cyfyngiadau ti'n gweld.
Dwi'n dall yn iawn, Mirig, ond mae gen I ni job I wneud.
Dwi'n derbyn hynny, a diolch I ti. Dwi'n gwybod os ydy Catrin eisiau dod I mewn, neu os yna rhywun arall eisiau ymateb I ni gael gweld ydyn ni'n mynd am bleidlais a'i peidio.
Yeah, just my question I asked about whether it's bona fide the motion.
Iawn. Gary, da ni'n mynd I cael ateb I hwnna, chwarae teg. Diolch, Mark.
Right. A member can bring a motion on any matter for which the authority is responsible or for which affects the county. So it is possible to bring such a motion. The issue is that the motion says it calls upon, because it's not actually, the running of the homelessness service is not actually a function of the council, it's a function of the executive. And the operational running of that function is delegated down through to the operational head of service. So it's perfectly appropriate for a member to bring the motion, and it's a matter for members whether they agree with it or not, having heard the advice that they've been given.
Yes, Bobby.
Mr. Chair, can I just round off?
Yes, indeed. Well, when I've spoken to Glenn,
okay.
Emrys should have known, right? Can I just have Emrys back? Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've been listening very carefully and I've been digging out my notes from the chairs and vice chairs meeting. Now then, the council.
Diffodd y llun, Emrys.
Again, yeah.
Diffodd y llun. Na ti di mewn o'n. Ti di mewn. Wait, na fo, ti'n ôl o'n.
Okay, yeah, the council we had from Gary in the actual chairs and vice chairs was against. Can you hear me?
Dwi'n glywed, mae rhywun yn torri ar draws.
Yeah, I just heard somebody know we can't or something. Right, okay. Council again, the council was again scrutinising the HR issue, which I fully understand. However, what we have here, as Hildy Roberts has mentioned, is information that came to us after a discussion, and it's the not knowing that's a problem. You heard Hugh Williams saying he's having to deal with local members, etc., and we all have to do it in various aspects of what happens in the council, and we need to have that information in front of us, and we didn't have it fully in that scrutiny meeting we had in the partnerships before, I recall. In any case, in the actual advice, yes, the resolution was to move it into November meeting, I believe, part of the Wales report on homelessness, which is the Welsh Government report. It's all part of it. We can't, it's not going to be specific on this, and I am fearful of that as well. I'm just outlining the discussion we had in the scrutiny, the chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny here. It's not a satisfactory situation. I'm very much aware of that, and it's the not knowing that's worrying us. Diolch.
Diolch yn arw. Cyn i Glenn ddod I mewn, a dwi am ganiatáu Glenn fel yr un sydd wedi cynnig. Bobby, da chi am ddod I mewn wwan jyst I ddeud be o'ch isio?
Well, I'll let Glenn go before me and I'll round it up.
Well, no, it's his proposal, so...
Oh,
if I could just come in, Chair.
Sorry, I thought he wanted to make a comment. Okay, then.
Bobby, before we don't save any more problems, we'll withdraw this motion now, yeah, on the understanding that it does go to scrutiny for an in-depth look. I want to point out that we do support wholeheartedly the homeless prevention team. All we're trying to do is make sure that, happy staff are good staff, that everybody's in the right place. It was the fact that we heard about this through the newspapers, but for now, we'll withdraw this motion certainly so that we can move on.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. And I would just like to assure everybody that this will be discussed until the end of February, and also the date we hope to have the restructure in place is May. If it takes longer, if they do need longer, then obviously, as they have done already during this process, they will expand it. Unlike somebody who spoke in the beginning, I can't remember who it was, it certainly hasn't been rushed through. It's been a long and careful planning. And we have given as much information as we possibly can to the partnership scrutiny without getting into the actual names and jobs and the restructure itself, because that would not be appropriate. So thank you all for all your comments, and thank you for your support, Jeanette.
Diolch yn fawr. Cyn I ni fedru mynd i'n pellach, rhaid I mi gael cadarnhad gyn y cynghorydd Mabon ap Gwynfor. Mae'r cais wedi dynnu nôl. Mae Glenn di cynnig hynny. Da chi'n derbyn?
Dwi'n derbyn yn llwyr, diolch.
Diolch yn fawr, Mabon. Felly mae'r cais wedi dynnu nôl a da ni wedi cael y drafodaeth. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Reit sydyn wan, dwi'n siŵr pwy sy'n mynd drwy'r rhaglen.
Yes, members, the forward work programme is there for you. The next meeting is on the 23rd of February. As you can see, there's the climate and ecological change strategy, the technical resolutions around council tax, capital plan recommendations of the strategic investment group, treasury management strategy, and the avoidance and reduction of plastics in Denbighshire County Council. And clearly from today, we will need to put into an appropriate date in the forward work programme the reports that would relate to the real living wage. I'll discuss that with officers and members and get that entered up.
Diolch yn fawr. So rwy'n hefo unrhyw sylw ynglyn â'r rhaglen chwefror ymlaen?
Oes, gwelwch yn dda.
Ie, diolch yn fawr. Eryl?
Na, Hugh.
O, mae'n ddrwg gynnau, Hugh, sorry. Ti'n mewn, Hugh?
I just, based on what Councillor Brian Jones said at the beginning of the meeting with regard to flooding, and I know that many members were involved in flooding last year when things happened and the year before, I just think that the report on the investigations and the conclusions should come back to the full council in the forward work programme in the future. Because I think there was a few things that were left off last time that we didn't see a conclusion to. And I'd like to see it that it's accountable here in full council so that the public can see that we as councillors are demonstrating that we are looking into everything and making sure there's no stone unturned into the flooding and the outcomes and the future, please.
I'd like to second that, Chairman.
Chair, if I could just come in a second.
Dach chi 'di gael o? Iawn, sorry, pwy sy'n dod mewn?
It's Councillor Richard Maynon, if I may, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Richard, you're breaking up, but diolch yn fawr. Come in.
The first of those wash-up meetings is taking place in 50 minutes' time, and Councillor Brian Jones and myself will be in attendance. It's not what would normally happen because they tend to be quite operational, but you're both Councillor Jones and I are going to be sat in with all of the senior officers involved, and that process will start. And I can happily give a commitment that what we learn from this incident can easily be fed back to full council, and it should. So I agree with Hugh Hildred-Roberts. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Sorry, Gary. Diolch yn fawr.
No, that's fine, Chair. So what we'll do is once that work's being done, if we can be notified of an appropriate date, we'll stick it into the council forward work programme.
Dyna fo. Iawn, Hugh?
Diolch yn fawr. Spoton.com.
Dyna fo. Mae Gary di addo ddod â fo i'r pwyllgor, i'r cyngor, sori, pen gawn i'r adroddiad.
Dwi wedi addo roi yn y rhaglen waith, fydd rhywun arall yn neud yr adroddiad.
Da iawn, da iawn. Rwy'n arall, unrhyw gynnig arall? Nagwes, felly gai ddiolch i chi am eich amynedd. Mae ddrwg yna am y trafferthion da ni'n gael efo'r technoleg newydd, ond mae o yn rhywbeth newydd i ni gyd, ac tydio ddim yn hawdd. A mae ddrwg yna bod rhaid mi gymryd gymaint amser i drafod ac i dod â chi mewn ac yn y blaen, ond dydy ddim mor hawdd a'ch gweld chi yma o'n mlaen ni yn y seddi. Felly, gai ddiolch i chi dros ben, a newch chi gymryd gofal wrth fynd adre, wrth wneud y te ac yn y blaen ac wrth siopa. Cadwch yn ddiogel. Mae Martin di codi law, neu da chi'n deud ffarwel? Dyna ni.
Thank you, Chair.
Bob gofal.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Thank you, Chair.